USA.gov.
For federal and state government info, there's no place like USA.gov.
Hi, and welcome to Civil Discourse. My name is Ken Hurley, and this program is sponsored by an organization called Civication Incorporated. Civication is a 501c3 organization. Check us out on the web. Civication promotes civic engagement and civil responsibility among Americans, ages 2 through death. We try to reach everybody we can possibly reach, and this program is our effort at communicating sometimes difficult and controversial topics in a civil manner. Have you ever been a target of extreme violence? Have you ever been a target of arson, bombing, stalking, assault, attempted murder, or murder? Well, Planned Parenthood has. Planned Parenthood operates 800 clinics across the country and is a leader in contraceptive and family planning services. The majority of their services consists of HIV screening and other STDs tests, as well as cancer. They also lead the industry in providing contraceptives, pregnancy tests, counseling, and education. But they also are the nation's leading provider of abortion services, making Planned Parenthood a target of people who seek ways to cut the budget and lower the nation's deficit, even though no federal funds are used to support abortions via Planned Parenthood's programs. Planned Parenthood is a target. And with us on the program in the studio is STACI Fox, who is the president and CEO of Planned Parenthood of North Florida. STACI, thank you for being here. I appreciate it very, very much.
Thanks for having me.
Did I misspeak?
Absolutely not. Planned Parenthood has become a target of extremists, not just those folks that you talked about that exude violence against us and our providers, but also our elected officials in D.C. and in Tallahassee.
Well, when we're talking about violence, I mean, we really do mean people are getting shot.
Absolutely. Dr. Tiller was shot point blank in the head in his own church.
In his church, which we used to think a church under everybody's rules would be a place of sanctuary.
Absolutely.
No matter what you were, even during World War II, if you got to a church, you would be fine. You would be safe there in some people's minds. Now that's no longer the case.
No, Dr. Slepian was shot in his own kitchen with his family watching.
Because why? They're a doctor providing abortion services?
Safe and legal abortions in the United States.
Well, what is it? I mean, Paul Hill, Reverend Paul Hill was executed in the state of Florida for murdering an abortion provider. And on the day of his execution, he's quoted as saying, and I might be paraphrasing, but we can check this out, look it up, as saying, "I expect God's glory in heaven," or a great reward in heaven, coming from a very religious viewpoint. Is that been your experience, that the people who would perpetrate this violence seem to think that religion is a reason behind it, that their viewpoints are doing a greater good?
I do think so, Ken. I mean, I think there is some defense that they use that is religious-based, but I think there are also a lot of people who believe in a woman's right to make an informed decision about her pregnancy that are also very religious.
Right. So in some respects, their religion has jumped the shark in some manners. But in a very horrible way. You Planned Parenthood are operating completely within the framework of our laws.
Absolutely.
You do nothing illegal. You're out there in the public, and you provide services, and a lot of times no cost to your client, correct?
Absolutely, and I think one of the big misnomers about Planned Parenthood is what we actually do. 97% of the work that we do across this country is preventative in nature. We provide life-saving cancer screening for women. Cervical cancer is one of the leading causes of death, and if women don't have their regular pap smears, they don't detect that cancer that's easily treatable if we detect it early. Breast cancer screenings, also testing and treatment for sexually transmitted infections, as you mentioned. Duval County has the highest rate of chlamydia, a sexually transmitted infection, in the state of Florida. So all of this work that's being done isn't clearly enough. Our health outcomes, along with all the other outcomes here in our own community, aren't that great.
Well, if somebody wanted to come to your clinic in North Florida, and you run many here in North Florida. You stretch from Jacksonville, you have clinics in Gainesville.
And Tallahassee as well.
And you're the president and CEO of the whole North Florida. You've kind of consolidated all of these clinics in the past few years.
We did, Ken. I'm glad you brought that up. Actually, in 2009, we merged two different Planned Parenthood corporations, one that was headquartered in Gainesville and one that was headquartered here in Jacksonville. And I was really lucky to get brought along in that process and became the CEO here in Jacksonville, moved to this great community in '09.
So if somebody thought they had an STD and had some difficulties or didn't have insurance, couldn't go to a family doctor, not a lot of people have family doctors any longer, they could walk into your clinic and say, I would like to get checked out?
Absolutely. They could come to us for testing and treatment.
And what's the process in terms of an individual saying, I don't know what's going on, but I'd like to be examined?
So the two primary things we do, both STD testing and treatment and cancer screening and birth control provision, simple appointment. You're welcome to walk in. If we can fit you in, we'll be happy to do that. You'll meet with our nurse practitioner, takes a history, does an exam, and we'll either provide some tests or treatment based on what she finds.
And is there a cost?
It depends on the client. We have a sliding scale depending on their academic status and also where they live and our ability to work in partnership here in Duval County with the health department.
Depends on their academic status?
Yeah, so if they're in high school, we charge less than once they get into college.
I see. Suppose they're an adult. Suppose they're 35 years old. Is that?
So our college students and our adults pay the same price.
I see. And suppose they can demonstrate they can't afford it.
We do have some funds that are able to assist clients when they're unable to afford our services.
What is necessary to demonstrate that?
Just saying out loud themselves, they don't have to bring any proof in.
Why do you suppose the new Congress is seem to be so adamantly opposed to funding for Planned Parenthood?
Well, I don't think it's Congress as a whole. I think we have some House members who are particularly focused on the work of Planned Parenthood, specifically Representative Mike Pence from Indiana, who offered an amendment on the continuing resolution to defund Planned Parenthood and actually eliminate our nation's family planning program as a whole, Title X, and take away services from 3 million women in this country. And I think Representative Pence's focus is because we provide abortion services. If you've watched any of the debate on the floor, they hesitantly admit that if we stopped providing abortion services, that they would have no problem funding all of the rest of the services that we do, the cancer screening, the birth control provision, the STD tests. But the abortion is the most troubling part. But the reality is if you take away Title X, if you take away our nation's family planning program, you're going to put women back 50, 100 years to a time when they were less equal than they are now. A woman's ability to control her own fertility and make decisions about when and if she becomes a mother allows her an equal seat at life's table, Ken, and I think that's really a crux about what we do.
Seems like they're against parenthood and against planning, But isn't it true though? You receive no federal fundings for the abortion services that you provide, and they know this.
Right. There is something called the Hyde Amendment, Ken, that prohibits federal funds for abortion services. We do have some members of Congress that are feeling the need to restate that and pass that in a new bill form, but we do have the Hyde Amendment that's in place that prohibits that from happening. But the reality is if you take away family planning in this country, abortion incidence is only going to increase. If women are unable to plan when and if they become a parent, then more unplanned pregnancies will happen.
What do you suppose happens? I mean, these same people seem to be also against Head Start, and programs for young children who are struggling in life. What do you suppose is happening? They don't want you to perform abortions. They're not funding abortions. And then when a child is born and there's a difficult situation and parents are struggling, they want to defund all of those types of programs there.
And make education cuts. I mean, you look at what our elected officials are doing in Tallahassee.
How do you reconcile this? What's happening?
It's hard to get in the minds of folks that with a mindset you don't necessarily agree with. I mean, I think cutting out social service programs in general does a great disservice to the people of the United States and the people in our communities. And I think that they're not thinking about the long-term ramifications of what this means for our culture.
Does it come back to some sort of religious tenet again, do you suppose?
I don't know. I don't know that I can answer that question knowledgeably.
Right. So in terms of what's happening in Jacksonville, I've seen, and the extreme types of violence, which is horrific, I've seen pickets outside of the clinic here in town. And that's okay with you. Is that true or not true?
Well, they have a right to be there. They have a First Amendment right to speech, and based on the FACE laws that were passed, the laws that prohibit them from getting too close to the front door of our clinics.
They can't obstruct.
Right. Or the other abortion providers here in Jacksonville, not just at Planned Parenthood. They have a right to be out there and speak their piece or hold a sign that says how they feel, but they don't have a right to interfere with women accessing services or men accessing services at our clinics.
Do you think it serves as a deterrent for women coming to the organization?
That's a great question, Ken, and based on my experience, I would say no. I mean, every woman, by the time she's made an appointment with us and she comes to us for services, she's made her decision. We certainly, once she comes in and visits with us, whether it's for affordable birth control or cancer screening or an abortion service, we're going to sit down and talk to her, make sure that she's sure about what she wants to do before we proceed. But by the time they pull into our parking lot, they've made a decision already. And they've counseled with the important people in their life. They've made an informed decision.
You're obviously pro-choice, and the other side of this claims to be pro-life. But that implies that you would be anti-life.
Right.
Is there any, I mean, how do you respond to that?
Well, I think it goes back to what you brought up earlier, Ken, is the issue around choice. That's really what it is about us. We believe that, Planned Parenthood believes that abortion should be safe and legal. And I think where we could all meet in the middle is an effort to reduce the need for abortion. If our elected officials really cared about women and children, they would meet us in the middle and work to reduce unplanned pregnancy in the United States. Unplanned pregnancy rates are 55–60% of pregnancies are unplanned in the United States. That puts women in a really tenuous decision to have to make a decision about what she wants to do and how that impacts her future and her family.
Oh, and one of the things that you do is educate the women and men alike as to how to prevent the pregnancy.
Absolutely.
That's really where you're at.
Absolutely.
And in your preventative education, you include all relative forms of the possible ways of preventing pregnancy.
Right, Ken. We provide comprehensive sex ed to women, men, and teens, not only in our clinical setting, but out in the schools and community-based organizations as well. And I think another thing that's really misunderstood about comprehensive sex ed is that abstinence is a key component of that. We talk about abstinence and how effective it is, but we also talk about other birth control methods and ways to prevent disease.
Well, they want to be abstinence-only kind of people, and that's fine if that's how you choose. That's what freedom is. Freedom, by the way, everybody, freedom is the availability of choice.
Right.
That's a definition of freedom. If you don't want to have an abortion, don't have an abortion.
Right.
That's your choice. And abstinence is something that individuals can elect to do.
Absolutely.
But history shows that that's somewhat not going to happen for everybody.
Right, and you look at the youth risk behavior surveys just here in Duval County, just under 50% of teens in Duval County are sexually active. So when they choose to become sexually active, we want them to be smart and informed about them, use birth control and ways to prevent disease. That's really important so that they don't have to deal with things like an unplanned pregnancy or a STD diagnosis.
Those sexual feelings that teens have is a very, very powerful feeling.
It is.
It's what creates procreation. That's
Absolutely.
one of our primary instincts.
Absolutely.
I want to come back. We want to talk a little bit more about the specifics of what happens in the clinic when an individual shows up.
Okay.
What do you do for men when they come in? You're watching a program called Civil Discourse. My name is Ken Hurley. Thanks for watching. Take a look at this. We'll be right back. Hello and welcome back to Civil Discourse. My name is Ken Hurley. As I've been telling you for 7 years now, this is our 7th year of doing this program, and I'm very pleased that we have been doing this program for so long. And you can watch programs that we upload to our website, civication.org. We upload the more recent programs. There's about a dozen or so of them online. You can go there and check them out. We've had a wide variety of guests over the 7 years we've been doing this program. And in the studio now, STACI Fox, the president and CEO of Planned Parenthood of North Florida. STACI, thanks for being here. I appreciate your time. And we're talking about some of the difficult stuff. And we get into some difficult issues just by being in your job. You have a controversial job.
Right. Yeah, just by being Planned Parenthood, the name elicits a lot of controversy. And I think it's an interesting time, as you mentioned at the beginning, that we are being targeted in such a way, both on a national level and a state level, and in a community level too, right here in Jacksonville.
Well, what goes on? I want to get to the state. I want to find out what's happening in Tallahassee because there's lots of bills coming through. But take us through somebody walking in. How long does a procedure take for an individual who is looking to have the procedure done, an abortion?
It depends on the abortion procedure they choose. There are two main types of abortion: a medication abortion or a surgical abortion. Medication abortion involves medications, 2 different medications that are administered by a physician. A surgical abortion is a procedure done by a physician. The procedure itself is about 3 to 5 minutes, but usually in-clinic time is anywhere from 3-4 hours.
And you follow up with the patient,
Absolutely.
the client afterwards,
yeah.
right? And keep tabs and make sure everything is all right?
Absolutely. Abortion is a very safe procedure statistically, but usually 2 weeks after the procedure, we like to see the client back in the clinic.
It's interesting to me when I've been out and about talking about abortion, and Roe v. Wade obviously is a big lightning rod. A lot of people think it's bad law. A lot of people call what's happening at Planned Parenthood infanticide, and they mislabel things. Obviously, there's nothing going on with an infant. You're not dealing with infants. That's not what it's about, but it's rhetoric designed to provoke and designed to conjure incorrect and misleading images. It's just wrong to do that.
Language is very powerful, I think.
It's extraordinarily powerful. But these people who engage in opposition to Planned Parenthood, most of the ones who I've spoken with have never read Roe v. Wade. And in Roe v. Wade, which I believe was written primarily by Justice Blackburn, there's a history of abortion throughout the centuries, and how difficult it has been for the woman, because the woman's life was always put at jeopardy until we figured out how to do this safely for the woman. And it seems to be a lot of men are the ones who are leading the charge against abortion. Would you assess it that way?
Yeah, it does certainly feel that way, Ken.
And last I checked, a man can't get pregnant.
Not to my knowledge.
A man is engaging in that. A woman needs a man to get pregnant. Not necessarily, but at some point you need sperm. All right? So why can't this be a private decision from a woman's viewpoint relative to her own conscience, her own religious beliefs, and make that truly a freedom aspect? Freedom, the availability of choice. Choice is, if you want an abortion, you'll get one with consultation through skilled physicians, and if you don't want one, you don't have to have one. Why can't it be as simple as that?
That's a great question, Ken. I wish I knew the answer, but I think people are misled about Roe v. Wade. That's built on the foundation of privacy. This is a private decision that a woman and her physician should make. Certainly not something we should be legislating.
Okay. Speaking of legislation, what's happening in Tallahassee? I know it's going quickly.
Right. Well, for the first time, we've had more anti-choice bills filed in Tallahassee than ever before. We had 18 anti-choice bills filed this session, and those bills are moving fast based on who we've elected last November and who's sitting in office and serving in Tallahassee right now. These bills are going to move fast and go to the floor for votes. And I think between the House and the Senate and our new governor, it's going to be a tough year for women, and not just women. You think about what's happening for educators and other social service providers around the state. People are going to be fighting for funding, but I think most importantly for us, women are going to be fighting for access to services.
Well, what can we do, or what do you suggest women do to try to stop the tide against Planned Parenthood and the services that you provide?
Well, the most important thing that anybody can do right now is to contact their elected officials. For example, it'd be great to pick up the phone and contact Senator Bill Nelson in his D.C. office or his office here in Jacksonville, and tell them that you support Planned Parenthood and the great work that Planned Parenthood does, and the life-saving cancer screenings that we provide, and the affordable birth control that we provide to women, and how important that is, so that Senator Nelson will stand up with us when it comes time for that vote.
Has Senator Nelson stood in the past with Planned Parenthood?
He has, but it's always important that elected officials hear from their constituents, whether it's Senator Nelson in D.C. or somebody like Representative Van Zandt or Senator Thrasher or Representative Fullwood, a freshman member to the House this year. I think that's the most important thing that people can do after they've voted. What
about some people who you think are traditionally do not stand with Planned Parenthood? Is it worth sending that same message to them?
I think so. I think because sometimes we get caught up in the abortion debate, and I think what the important part to remember is what that Title X program is, that national family planning program is, that provides affordable birth control to women, also provides affordable vasectomy services to men. And without that, what women and men will have to deal with in this country, over 3 million women we're talking about. So I think it's important, and often folks who don't necessarily believe in a woman's right to access a safe and legal procedure like abortion, they do believe in a woman's access to birth control. And that's really what we're talking about here.
And what's wrong with birth control? Why is that? I mean, at one point the Catholic Church came out against birth control, for lots of reasons, but haven't they even changed their mind on this?
I don't believe they have changed their mind on birth control, but there are a lot of different forms of birth control, whether it's a pill you take or a patch that you wear or a permanent device.
That's all for women,
right? Right, or condoms for men.
And
but
a vasectomy for men.
Vasectomy, more permanent, or more natural methods, like something we call the natural family planning method. That often folks who are very religious or those folks who don't want to be taking medications use. They're all different ways to prevent an unplanned pregnancy from happening. And you know what, Ken? Science tells us that a planned pregnancy is a lot healthier than an unplanned pregnancy.
Well, that's in your name, planning. Planning. What's wrong with planning? And for the natural way of preventing, don't you have to time when the egg is, when you're ovulating and all of that?
So basically you do 3 things with natural family planning. You're watching the calendar, so when a woman has her period, she's taking her basal body temperature, so watching the fluctuations in that, and also watching her cervical mucus. And those 3 changes tell her when she's ovulating.
And then at that point, a woman would ovulate for a couple of days?
Right, well, ovulation happens sort of, at a certain point in time, but as far as when a woman's fertile, it's usually about a 5-day window around that ovulation
So
time.
if you're interested in starting a family, that's when you want to engage in lovemaking and sex. And if you're interested in avoiding starting a family, you want to abstain
or use
during
protection.
that. Or use protection during that time.
Absolutely.
Seems reasonable, and you explain this to anybody who is willing to listen.
Absolutely. But we still have the most common form of birth control used today for women, which is the birth control pill. Very affordable for women. We offer affordable birth control at $20 a pack, which is very reasonable for women who are looking to prevent pregnancy, which you look at the fertile time in a woman's life, they're spending a lot of time in their life avoiding pregnancy, and we want to give the women the tools that they need to do that.
Now, a pack is for a month? Okay, so that is very affordable then, right?
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
What do you suppose is the problem with sex? And I mean, to me, that's one of the joys of life. Am I missing something there?
No, I think sex becomes a very controversial topic and not something that we as a culture are comfortable talking about out in the open. But Ken, I think you bring up a really interesting topic, because the way we do talk about sex a lot of times in the media is in a very violent way, in a very irresponsible way. And you look at a lot of the video games, movies, music, that are great and entertain us, but they don't talk about sex in a responsible way. Healthy relationships, talking about sex with your partner. And that means not just the joy of sex, but also talking about the protection and the planning for pregnancy or not. That can take the anxiety away from sex. And I think it's really disappointing to see that our culture approaches sex that way. We're very sexualized, and kids are getting very sexual messages through music and media. But what they're not getting is the media literacy piece to understand what it is they're seeing and how that translates into a healthy relationship they need to have in their own lives.
The desire to procreate is what is part of sex, and people would tell us use it only for procreation, but that doesn't seem to be natural. I mean, that doesn't seem to be what we are all about. And then people will tell us, well, you have to wait until you're married. Well, there's a religious ceremony for marriage, and there's a state license for marriage. But even that doesn't seem to be, if you study people and politicians, you know, in particular, they're having affairs with this one and that one. It doesn't matter. It's not just Bill Clinton. It's everybody was, you know, a lot of people who were against Bill Clinton for all of that. They were doing it while they were charging Bill Clinton with, you know, inappropriate behavior and lying under oath and all of that kind of. But as we're talking about, sex is not necessarily a bad, dirty, something that should not be talked about.
But what should be talked about are the values that families have around sex and sexuality and relationships.
But that's a good point, though. Families have values, but do all families have the exact same values?
Absolutely.
And should they?
No.
No, they shouldn't. The family has to decide what their values are.
Right, and as do individuals. Some individuals don't necessarily agree with the values of their family, but I think it's a family's job, whatever that family looks like, whether it's two dads or a grandma raising a young child, that they impart those values and impart the ability to a young person to make informed decisions about their own values.
Jacksonville, you said, or Duval County, Jacksonville has the highest rate of chlamydia?
Yeah, unfortunately we have, it's a bacterial infection, easily treated, but we do have the highest rate of chlamydia in the state of Florida, which I think says that we're not necessarily doing all the things that we could be to empower teens and young folks to be making responsible decisions. And so I think it has a little bit to do with the clinical piece, but a lot to do with education.
Real quickly, what is chlamydia and how do we prevent it?
So chlamydia is a bacterial sexually transmitted infection, and we prevent it by using a condom during sex.
And how does it manifest itself?
Sometimes it manifests with no symptoms, which can cause some problems. Without treatment, this is not an infection that goes away on its own. So we definitely have to treat it with antibiotics. And so we treat the infected client that we see and make sure we get their partner in for treatment as well.
And if it doesn't go away on their own and they don't know they have it, what do you do?
So the long-term problems of a disease like chlamydia is something we call pelvic inflammatory disease, which can lead to infertility. So there are longer, deeper problems when it comes to a easily transmittable and treatable infection like chlamydia.
Can chlamydia happen with men too?
Absolutely.
And how does it manifest in a man?
So some men have discharge or itching or burning during urination, but again, some men and women have no symptom at all. So testing is really important, but it goes back to the talking piece about sex, talking to your partner, make sure you're using protection, getting tested together, and then deciding at a time when you're comfortable not using protection.
If somebody wanted to come into your clinic and get an HIV test, do you do that for them?
Absolutely, we do that.
What does it cost?
They can do that at a quick, rapid test, or they can do that with a free anonymous test. It takes about 2 weeks to get the results back.
It can be done anonymously?
It can be.
How does that work if you're going to mail them results?
We don't mail results. They come back in, and they
in?
just have a card with a number, and so we match the number to the paperwork and give them their results that way.
So your privacy is truly protected?
Yeah, but your privacy is protected whether it's anonymous or confidential. We do abide by HIPAA laws.
Well, Stacy, we're all out of time. I appreciate it.
Oh, well, thanks so much, Ken. It was great to get a chance to talk about our great work.
I hope you come back. I hope you come back. You've been watching a program called Civil Discourse. My name is Ken Hurley. Check us out on the website, civication.org. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time. Mail at 4830 Atlantic Boulevard, Jacksonville, Florida, 32207, or call us at 904-591-7634. Civication Incorporated is a nonprofit, nonpartisan educational organization.